Hello everyone, my name is Ivan Sergeyevsky. I'm part of Group 1. We're arguing in support of the first claim, and this is Debate 1 of our summer course. So our claim that we're going to debate in this topic is that Trump's administration's regulatory changes to the ACA will expand health insurance for U.S. citizens. And we're going to argue, of course, in support of this claim. Now, to give you a little bit of background on what the ACA is. Now, the ACA stands for the Affordable Care Act. It's a comprehensive healthcare reform law that was enacted in March 2010 during President Barack Obama's term. It's something that Barack Obama pledged his term upon. It's one of the primary changes that he vowed to make as a president, and was proud when he did in fact go ahead and get that bill enacted in March. Now that the Trump administration has taken control of the White House and Donald Trump is our president, which is a Republican of course, remember that President Barack Obama was a Democrat, the Trump administration has criticized this act and has vowed to make big changes to it, perhaps even eradicating it altogether. So far they've already been successful in making various changes, and so that's something we're going to get into in the following slides. So what has changed ever since Donald Trump has had his hands around the ACA bill? Well, the mandate has been eliminated, so the unpopular penalty that most US citizens would see if they had failed to enroll in Obamacare has now been eliminated. A group of politicians led by Texas's Attorney General went to the Supreme Court and went ahead and argued that the mandate was unconstitutional. They were successful and they actually won that suit, and now the penalty is zero. So that's one big change. Another big change is that the ACA now, as a result of that, is becoming increasingly criticized. And so what does that mean? Well, they see now that the Texas Attorney General was successful in getting the mandate eradicated, which is a big push against ACA. They now feel that they can pick apart this act one piece at a time, one case at a time. And so that's what the Supreme Courts have been seeing, is an influx of cases being brought forth before the Supreme Court, criticizing and aimed at making changes, making amendments to the current healthcare reform law. And thirdly, alternative plans have become much more readily available under the Trump's administration regulatory changes. Now what we have is an increased availability of short-term plans, an increased availability of association plans, and an increased availability of reimbursement plans. And we'll get into what each of those means in following slides to come. So let's talk about this no penalty victory for the Republicans. Well, like we previously stated, the ACA had a mandate for insurance coverage. So a lapse in insurance coverage would effectively result in a penalty. And yes, people would have to pay this fine, somewhere around $500 on average. But a Texas Attorney General went and led a suit in the Supreme Court and won against the United States, deeming that the mandate was unconstitutional. Now, the way that the Obama administration brought forth this mandate was that it would be a tax, and therefore they argued it is constitutional. Well, Republicans felt on the contrary, and they argued that because this mandate demanded that people pay a dollar sum if they were to lapse in coverage, then for that reason it is unconstitutional. So because they demanded it, it was deemed to be unconstitutional and they eradicated it. So now the penalty is zero for having lapse in insurance coverage, and many people favor that option. And like I said previously, it paved consideration for eliminating the ACA entirely and picking apart its various intricacies and different aspects of the act. It still exists, and marketplaces associated with the Obamacare still exist, but the Trump administration is continuing to make steps towards minimizing its effectiveness and eradicating it altogether. So we're going to continue talking about the ACA being criticized. Now, Republican victory in Supreme Court on the ACA issues open gates for further suits, something we've already talked about. This weakens the ACA altogether because now we see people criticizing publicly. There's being Republican victories being made in the Supreme Court criticizing the ACA, and the public opinion tends to sway as a result. And so people see that the ACA is being attacked, they start to question themselves whether it's a viable option. And so this altogether is putting pressure on the ACA as a whole, weakening it, and potentially putting it in danger of being eradicated. Democrats have fought against this process, so they have came back and tried to appeal the already decided on suits in the Supreme Court. They've tried to slow down new suits that are coming and making progress in the Supreme Court, but as of date, they have failed to do so. Their requests to appeal have been turned down, and they have been unsuccessful in trying to slow down any other suits related to the ACA coming into the Supreme Court. Now, one part that we discussed earlier about the changes that this administration has made is making alternative plans more readily available. And so if not Obamacare, then where do you go? If not these marketplace exchanges for insurance coverage, then what are people to do? Well, the Trump administration has presented several options. Short-term plans. Short-term plans are exactly that. They're insurance plans that are shorter in duration. They tend to be much cheaper in terms of premiums, and they offer customers a greater flexibility in terms of duration, eligibility, and coverage as well. Next, we have association plans, which are largely employer-funded plans. They're pooled insurances amongst organizations and businesses to offer their employees cheaper insurance. Also tends to result in cheaper premiums, and they tend to offer some pretty good flexibility as well. And lastly, we have reimbursement plans, which are also employer-funded tax advantage benefits. These are plans that, in case something was to arise, there's an option from your employer for them to reimburse any healthcare bills or any healthcare outstanding balances that you might acquire. And so the advantages of all of these options are that they're cheaper than Obamacare, which we will see in an example later on in this presentation. They offer greater flexibility to the customers. They customize the duration, so you don't have to sign on lengthy insurance plan coverage deals. You can go with monthly, yearly plans if that's something that interests you instead, rather than a longer duration plan. And they tend to have an easier eligibility, so people are able to become eligible easier. They don't have too many roadblocks to people getting coverage. And so this is something that makes it very easy for customers when they do shop for health insurance. So what are some advantages that come about after all of these changes that the Trump administration has made to the ACA? Well, for one, there's no penalty for lapse in coverage. That's something that a lot of Americans are happy about. I'm sure it's not a pleasant thing to see a fine for you not having insurance coverage and actually having to pay that, so that's a big advantage. You're now offered a variety of healthcare plans that are now available that we just went over earlier in the slide. So you have short-term plans that are available, you have association plans offered by your employer, most likely, that are also available to you, and then you have reimbursement plans that are also a third option that is offered that's also employer funded. You have greater flexibility, you have the opportunity to change your duration. It's very cost effective. We'll later see that compared to Obamacare, people are seeing big percentages in savings. It's easy to enroll into these plans. You can, in some of these cases, in some of these plans, be with insurance coverage the very next day. So this is something that people might look forward to. And you can customize your duration. Like I said, it can be a short-term plan, or it could be a hybrid plan where it could be annual, a few years, doesn't have to be month to month, for instance. Now, we are arguing that these changes do in fact expand insurance coverage. And why do I say that? Well, the mandate is eliminated, so a lot of people are now favoring health insurance. They see that they're not going to be dinged for not having any, so they're actually having reason to go out and look at different options available to them, see if they can get coverage. Cheaper premiums that are offered as a result of the new alternative short-term association and reimbursement plans offer great enticement to customers who are shopping for insurance. This would definitely be an aspect of the change that would expand insurance coverage for U.S. citizens. There's a savings of up to 60% as well with some of these new short-term plans as opposed to going with Obamacare. That's one thing that would definitely entice more people to have insurance companies, or rather insurance coverage. Sorry about that. Insurance coverage, now that prices are lower, they might actually go and look for coverage. Healthy people who might not have otherwise went and shopped for insurance coverage might now have the incentive to go and check out what's available. And lastly, people of course favor cost-efficient and flexible options. So Obamacare was very strict. It gave you little wiggle room and you had to basically play ball by the rules of the ACA Act. Well, the new Trump administration regulatory changes to the ACA have allowed for better cost efficiency for customers looking for health insurance coverage and greater flexibility. So lastly, we're going to describe a situation, a real world situation where we can see that the new changes made by the Trump administration to the ACA and the new plans set forth, the new availability of short-term plans, actually make health insurance much cheaper for people than it would be if they had actually stayed with Obamacare. So for example, if we take a family who makes $105,000 annually income combined, they would choose Obamacare in this instance and would qualify for the bronze plan. Now the bronze plan would include $2,000 in premiums, monthly premiums, give or take. So this family would be paying alone $2,000, give or take, in premiums. Now let's take that same family and have them consider a short-term plan, one that is recommended by the Trump administration as a better, viable option for health insurance. Now that same family, if they were to use short-term plans, would only spend $200 to $1,400 in monthly premiums. So $200 to $1,400 compared to the $2,000 in premiums with Obamacare makes sense. It's simply cost efficient to go with a short-term plan. So this would definitely entice people to join on, check out health insurance. Even people who are healthy, would have not considered health insurance options in the past, would now perhaps consider them, being that it is so cost effective. I mean, in some cases it really is up to a 60% cost savings, which is pretty remarkable. Now, in addition to having cost savings, they would get quality insurance. They would also enjoy luxury like flexibility, easy eligibility. They can get coverage the following day in some cases. They would have no risk of penalty. They would no longer be charged if they were to go with a different option or choose to not have health insurance. And overall, this would seem like a more favorable option than Obamacare. It would entice people to look for health insurance, to get coverage, and in conclusion, the Trump regulatory changes to the ACA do in fact expand health insurance coverage to U.S. citizens. Thank you very much.